Hi, good evening everyone. Thank you for joining in on this webinar on SAN2, Supporting Decision Making in the Indian Urban Sanitation Sector. Now, I would request you to kindly mute your line while I'm speaking, and I'll be taking all your questions in the end. Now, starting on. Okay. First of all, I'd like to talk a little about the current situation of sanitation in India. Then maybe we can focus on what are the issues at hand and how we can address them. Finally, we'll take a look at the second version of our sanitation tool. And with that, I'll take your questions and end the webinar. So, starting. Let's first look at some numbers, shall we? So here we have the numbers from Census 2011. So it shows you that 18.6% of urban households have no latrine facility. About 32.7% have access to pipe sewer system. So the sewerage system we all love to talk about, that we feel we are worthy of, is actually serves only 33% of the whole urban population of our country. Near about 40% have septic tanks. 6% of households depend on public toilets. Now, these are some alarming numbers, but this is not where it ends. We have far more alarming numbers right ahead. In our country, we have 29 major cities with fully functional sewage treatment plants, none of which are working at capacity. Although improved sanitation has been provided to a good percentage of the population, as you can see, it's increased from 21% to 34%, the fact remains that about 594 million people in India, which is approximately 50% of the country, still resorts to open defecation, which for the purposes of the presentation we can define as a lack of any sanitation system facility. So the lack of any improved sanitation is open defecation, and 50% of our country has to still resort to that. Furthermore, when we speak of water pollution, about 80% of said water pollution is actually caused by the lack of proper sanitation. Now, there is a lot of impact of the lack of proper sanitation, and it's not just about smelly sewers that we have to look at. So amongst the impacts include economic impacts, health impacts, environmental impacts, of course, and even social impacts. So when I say economic impacts, just to throw out a couple of numbers again, the Water and Sanitation Program estimates that a total annual cost of per sanitation amounts to a loss of about $54 billion, which is 6% of our GDP. And if that's not alarming enough, let's go to the health impacts. And where do we start there? Diarrhea, malaria, measles, trachoma, ALRI, intestinal worms. UNESCO estimates that about 1,600 deaths per day is caused in India because of diarrhea. And they also say that about 90% of these deaths could have been avoided by the use of safe drinking water and adequate sanitation and hygiene practices. Environmental impact is something I think we are all aware of. Untreated waste enter rivers and lakes and other water bodies, and they contain a large number of pathogens, which, as you can tell, affect us greatly. Foul odor is just the tip of the iceberg. Additional biological matter increases the oxygen demand, depleting the dissolved oxygen in any water body, making it difficult for the animals living it, basically reducing the health of any water body. Nutrients cause eutrophication, as we know, and dirty water, sewerage water is a breeding hub of flies and mosquitoes and other pests. Social impact is another impact that is often overlooked, but I think recent events tell us that this is something we need to focus on. Social impacts include reduced attendance at work as well as school. It also is a primary reason why a lot of girls across the country drop out of school, and it consists of loss of dignity, and it's also a reason why many dangerous and life-threatening situations arise where women are forced to leave their houses at night to use fields due to the lack of sanitation facilities at their homes. So this is what the lack of sanitation does to us. Now the question we have here is why? Why does this situation occur? Why is about 50% of our population still resorting to open defecation? Is this a technology issue? Do we not have proper technologies to take care of sanitation? But thing is, there's no dearth of available technologies depending upon the size of population you wish to serve, the sophistication you're willing to go for, the type of water quality you wish to provide. There is no dearth of technologies. Whether we are talking about large, highly mechanized, extremely expensive technologies, for example, activated sludge process, USBs, sequential batch reactors, etc. Or we are talking about on-site, at-home solutions such as septic tanks. Technologies are of a number of varieties. We have technologies which require almost no machines, no mechanization at all, where all the treatment is done through completely natural processes. We have technologies that are highly mechanized, where every step of the technology requires some sort of mechanical action, requires a lot of professionals at hand to work these technologies. We have technologies that can be centralized, as wastewater treatment plants usually are. We can have decentralized approaches as well, which usually cater to a community or are shared by people or may be used at public facilities. So are technologies the only solution we need? The answer is no. And that we keep getting. So very recently I had attended a workshop on decentralized wastewater treatment. And over the last few years alone, there have been so many improvements in existing technologies. There have been so many new novel ideas that have been introduced. So this is not the only issue we are facing. So what's the other issue? Technology happens to be just one aspect of this broad picture that we are considering. We need to think about the socio-economic and cultural impact of a technology. What do I mean by that? Well, here's the thing. Any sanitation system at the end of the day has to serve its users. And the way users react to it, the way users feel about any technology is extremely important. For example, let's say I introduce a system which is extremely sophisticated, where wastewater is treated to such an extent it's potable, it's drinking water. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Convincing people to adapt this technology is where the crux of the problem lies, because no matter how good the quality of the water may be, chances are that people will be unwilling to use such a technology. So we have to address existing norms. For example, a lot of government officials still believe that highly mechanized systems, that sewerage systems are the way to go. So if it's not sewerage, it's not good. Irrespective of what kind of treatment you get and whether or not the water quality is equally good at the end of the day, if it's not sewerage, it's not good. So these ideas need to be questioned, because there are many situations where a sewerage system would not work. For example, if you have a city where the average water consumption of a per capita water consumption is about 40 liters per day, you cannot have a sewerage system, since sewerage system relies on a large amount of water to be used. And just to put it into perspective, old flush toilets, not the new, more environmentally friendly ones, but the slightly older flush toilets, used to use near about 20 liters of water just for flushing. So that's about one person using the totality of 2 times of flush water. And with that limited amount of water available, Going for something that requires such diluted black water is not a sensible decision. So we need a means to question these facts, to question these ideas that people have in their heads about how because something is more complex, it is automatically better. Another important factor is to consider different indicators, different bases for making a decision for putting a sanitation system in place. Deciding to put a sanitation system is the easy thing, because if we need to advance as a country, we have to put sanitation systems. We have to reduce the open defecation dependent population, which is somewhere around 18% now, and we are supposed to reduce it to about 12.15% by 2015, based on the 8th Millennium Development Goals. But how do we decide which system to put in place? There are many factors that come into picture here. Things such as land availability, cost, acceptability, maintenance, etc. They are exceedingly important, because these systems are not meant for a year or two. These are long-term ideas. These are long-term solutions, and they need to be compared against each other. They need to be questioned and they need to be validated. So how do you choose a technology? How do you construct a scenario? You have some data available with you on the current situation, but how do you gauge a solution to the problem? And this, I think, is a good enough segue into what we call currently SAN tool, and we're still waiting for a better name, so if you have a suggestion, please do send in. And SAN tool. So what does SAN tool do? So it has the following modules. We have a GIS-enabled user interactive interface, so that when you look at a city, you get information on the geographical conditions, you get information on the population, the kind of sanitation features already available in the city. You are allowed to make certain changes, make certain improvements, and see the impact of these improvements on the city. It allows you to assess any changes that you make. It allows you to assess multiple changes that you make. And it can compare a portfolio of technology choices. So if you have a city, you have a population, you know that a certain section of the city goes unserved by any sanitation facility, you are allowed to serve them in any way which you want, in the sense that you can choose a system, you can choose a combination of different kinds of systems, and you can measure the impact of your choices on the city. And you can construct such a scenario, and you can construct multiple scenarios and compare them against each other to describe what is best for your city. So, now let's take a glimpse at our SAN tool. Many of you must have seen the first version, which debuted in March, and it was also shown in one of the staff meetings. So we've come a long way from there. So what the very first screen allows you to do, okay, before I get into details, let me just say that SAN tool works on 5 separate screens, all of which can be opened at the same time, and any changes made in one screen will impact the other, and you can see these changes immediately. And a very good depiction of that, of course, is in Darpan. So similar to how Darpan works, SAN tool also works on 5 separate screens. Now, the very first screen is your information screen, and it allows you to peruse through different wards in the city. So the moment you click on a ward, like here, a ward has been clicked, as you can see, and that's the first ward. You will get the information on the ward. You will get information on what kind of population is there, what kind of soil conditions, what is the groundwater table, what sorts of systems exist in that particular ward. And the choice of any of these wards will let you make changes in the current scenario. This is how the second screen looks. So the moment you've selected a ward in your first screen, it will automatically be updated in this screen. As you can see here, there is a base scenario, which is your currently existing situation, and there is a modified scenario. So any changes you make will be again and again updated in the modified scenario. You can make changes in two parts of the population, the slum area as well as the non-slum area. So the moment you select the slum area, you can then perform two actions. The first action is creation of a system. Creation of a system basically means that you will serve the population which is currently unserved. Or in other words, you will serve a population which resorts to open defecation. So as you can see on your screens, under base scenario, unserved houses are about 1,355. So this population will be targeted by your create option. The second form of action that you can take is modify. You can modify an existing system to another system. Why is this important? Because many systems are either outdated or they don't function well, or they have a lot of negative impact on the people using it as well as on the environment. So for many situations, you might want to change a system which already exists. And for that use, you would choose the modify option. For example, system 1. System 1 for us means a pit latrine. We have a list of 6 systems which we're using for the sake of our tool. So for us, it means a pit latrine. A pit latrine is basically a hole on the ground which is collecting excreta. If it's not lined properly, if it's not covered properly, it can lead to a lot of discomfort, a lot of dangerous contact with fecal sludge for people who are using a pit latrine. It will also have a lot of environmental impact because the water that is present might seep through into the groundwater. So in this scenario, you might want to change from a pit latrine to something which is more protected, something which ensures that this excreta remains collected, which does not expose it to air, which ensures that there's no seepage, like for example a septic tank. So you would use the modify option. You can select any number of households to modify, of course lesser than the currently existing number. And any action that you take is then updated into the summary and the log, as you can see on your right side. So the moment any action has been taken, it's been committed, you can see the impact of these actions on your indicators. Indicators are illustrative parameters. As I'd spoken earlier, many factors such as the capital cost, the order and maintenance cost, the land requirement, energy requirement, so on and so forth. So these are important indicators that everyone needs to consider while choosing a technology or while choosing a system. So the ward indicators tell you the changes that you made in the ward and what kind of impact they have. For example, if you've served the open defecation dependent population, so the total number of households that has a sanitation system within the ward increases. So your very first indicator, which shows percentage served, would increase. Similarly, if you had a sewerage system, then the percentage sewerage cover would increase. If you're using a system which requires a lot of land, for example, waste stabilization ponds, which are quite cheap, quite inexpensive and very easy to maintain, but use a lot of land. So if you're using a particular system like that, it will show very high land requirement, even if the capital cost and the operational and maintenance cost might be low. So these indicators are at two levels. One is the ward indicators and the other one is the city indicators. Now this is a scenario that you have constructed. You have selected a ward, you have taken some actions, you've seen the result. You can go ahead and select another ward and do the same changes. As and when you save your action, it gets saved into the scenario. And with you, there exists a scenario which you can then measure in the city indicators. But quite often the fact is that you don't want to see one scenario, you want to see multiple scenarios, and you want to see how they fare against each other. And for that, we have the scenario comparison screen. Here, you can select up to 5 different scenarios, and it will show you the performance of each and every one of these scenarios on your indicators. So as you can see on the screen, there exist 2 tables. First, we compare the slum areas in all 5 scenarios. In the second case, we compare the non-slum areas in all 5 scenarios. And we noted the difference. The red indicates the worst in the situation. When we say worst, we mean undesirable. For example, the capital cost you would hope would be minimal, so the red would indicate the highest capital cost. At the same time, your percentage served, the percentage of the city that is served by a sanitation facility, you would want it to be higher. So here the high is green. So this screen allows you to compare any 5 scenarios as long as they're saved, irrespective of what wards you worked at, how many wards you worked on, what kind of systems you placed or you changed. So this right here is our SAN tool. Of course, there are lots of changes and modifications that we are aiming at still, and we had a project advisory meeting yesterday on the 25th, and we have received a lot of constructive and informational guidance from people. We have received lots of comments, and we are aiming at getting all these together and improving the SAN tool even further. And currently we are seeing on the following facts. We're trying to look at the kind of data which is available with different governing bodies and how that data can be used by us. We're trying to take a deeper look at what the words served and unserved means, because usually it can be interpreted in 2 ways. One is that served means a sanitation system exists for a place. Served could also mean a toilet exists. Then we are trying to get more GIS-based information, especially on the very first screen. So you can go through Chloroplat maps and you can see the current situation, which will help you figure out what kind of changes you wish to make in screen 2. Then another thing we're looking at is the compatibility of systems with target areas. So it basically means incorporating more constraints, because every ward would be different, and depending upon the features of the ward, you'll have to select the right system. So if a ward, for example, has a very high water table, you don't want to go for something which is underground and at the same time is not very well protected. So we are trying to look at constraints in terms of groundwater table, soil type, susceptibility to natural disasters, especially like floods. And we are also looking forward to a more detailed financial assessment. Currently, our tool can give you an estimated capital cost based on the changes you make, an estimated order and maintenance cost, but we are trying to go in deeper. And we are also trying to incorporate relevant indicators. As I said in the beginning, social factors are extremely important, health factors are extremely important, so we need to be able to incorporate these indicators. And reusability is another thing that's coming up. As more and more new systems are designed, new technologies are designed, people are looking at options in which you can reuse the water, you can reuse the treated fecal sludge in some way or the other. So there are lots of relevant indicators that we're looking for so that we can construct a very robust and very flexible tool that people can use to see the conditions in their cities and try to analyze in what ways they can improve the condition in their cities. And that is all. So I'll take any questions if there are any. So hi Nihid, you wanted to ask a question?
Hello.
Hello?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So, is it possible for you to go back a couple of slides on this interface?
Sure.
So
Which
slide
slide would
10
you like me
back,
to go
please.
to?
Yeah, slide 10.
Slide 10? Yeah, okay.
This one, yeah. So is it possible for the decision maker to say that I want to limit capex to a certain value and feed that as a constraint? So, for example, you were talking about constraints on water quality and I think natural disasters and so on.
Yeah. So that is
Similarly,
something that we had considered before. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. Does this have a screen where the user can say that I want to limit capex between, say, 10 and 500 and opex between this and this value and so on, and get only scenarios which meet that?
That is something that we had considered incorporating for the second version, but that was a little more on the complicated side. So this is the first time we have constructed this scenario comparison. So I think that is something we want to look in for the next version of the tool, definitely. Setting goals to choose which scenario you want to compare, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are hoping to incorporate these sort of changes, these sort of sophistications for the next version of the tool.
Cool. Thanks, Shramana.
Welcome. Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for joining me today, and I hope you got some idea on what our SAN tool is trying to do. But I would request that if you are interested in seeing how it works in real time, please do contact us, and we'll show you in the conference room, which is something very interesting to be seen. And thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a good evening.